The metal handcuffs bit into my wrists as Sheriff Sheila yanked my arms behind my back. My garage, my sanctuary, had been transformed into a crime scene, with yellow tape stretched across the entrance and deputies pawing through my belongings. "Found another one," her deputy called out, holding up my father's vintage torque wrench. The smirk that crossed Sheriff Sheila's face sent ice through my veins. "That was my father's," I protested, voice breaking despite my efforts to stay calm. "It has been in my family for 20 years." Sheriff Sheila stepped closer, her badge catching the afternoon light. "Not anymore, it is not," she whispered, just low enough that only I could hear. "Matches the description of stolen property. Funny how that works, is it not?" I watched helplessly as she placed the wrench in an evidence bag without logging it, without photographing it, without following any protocol I had ever seen on television or in real life. And that was the moment I knew with absolute certainty. Sheriff Sheila was not enforcing the law. She was using it as cover to steal from the very people she had sworn to protect. I have always lived by two principles that my father taught me: keep your word and take care of your tools. In our small town of Millbrook, population 3,412, people know me as Marcus Jensen, the man who shows up when promised, charges what was quoted, and leaves your home better than he found it. For 15 years, I have built a reputation as reliable as the sunrise. My hands bear the marks of honest labor, calloused palms, a crooked index finger from a framing accident, and perpetual dirt beneath my nails that never quite disappears no matter how hard I scrub. These imperfections tell the story of countless decks built, leaky pipes fixed, and walls repainted for neighbors and friends across 3 counties. My garage workshop sits behind my modest ranch house on Maple Street. Inside those walls, I have arranged my life's collection of tools with the precision of a surgeon preparing for an operation. Each hammer, wrench, and screwdriver has its place. The larger power tools, my table saw, compound miter, and drill press, stand like sentinels against the back wall. Some were inherited from my father, others purchased one paycheck at a time, sacrificing new clothes or dinner out to invest in quality equipment that would last a lifetime. Every Sunday after church, I volunteer with the rebuilding ministry, helping elderly members of our congregation with repairs they cannot afford. Pastor Davis often jokes that I have built half the wheelchair ramps in town. That might be an exaggeration, but not by much. There is profound satisfaction in seeing Mrs. Ellison navigate smoothly into her home after years of struggling with those 3 front steps. Law enforcement in Millbrook had always been straightforward. Sheriff Morgan, who served for 22 years, knew everyone by name and practiced community policing before it had a fancy title. He retired last year, and his replacement, Sheila Grayson, came from a larger county to the north with promises of modernization and higher standards. The first few times Sheriff Sheila visited my workshop were routine checks. There had been a series of code updates for home businesses, and she was just making sure everyone was compliant. Something about her smile never quite reached her eyes, but I dismissed it as the natural caution of someone new to our tight-knit community. "Impressive collection you have here," she remarked during her second visit, running her fingers along the edge of my workbench. "Must have taken years to acquire." "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "Some belong to my father, others I saved for. Each one represents months of work." She nodded, writing something in her notebook before departing. I thought nothing of it. In a small town, interactions with local officials were common and unremarkable. April 15th began like any other Tuesday. I was finishing installation of kitchen cabinets for the Wilsons when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway, balancing my cordless drill in my other hand. "Mr. Jensen," the voice belonged to Sheriff Sheila, "we need you to return to your residence immediately. There has been a report concerning your property." My heart accelerated. What kind of report? Is there a fire, a break-in? "Just return home, Mr. Jensen. We will discuss it upon your arrival." The drive home took 12 minutes. They were the longest 12 minutes of my life. As I turned onto Maple Street, I saw the sheriff's cruiser parked in my driveway, lights silently flashing. Sheriff Sheila stood beside it, arms crossed, watching my approach with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up prey. "What is happening?" I asked, stepping out of my truck. She handed me a folded document. "We have received an anonymous tip about stolen property potentially being stored on your premises. This is a warrant to search your garage workshop." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. In 15 years, no one had ever questioned my integrity, my honesty. Yet here stood the sheriff, official paper in hand, prepared to treat me like a criminal. "There must be some mistake," I protested, scanning the document without truly comprehending the legal terminology. Sheriff Sheila's face remained impassive. "No mistake, Mr. Jensen. Please unlock your garage. The sooner we begin, the sooner we can conclude this matter." I complied, still believing this was a simple misunderstanding that would be quickly resolved. After all, I had nothing to hide. Every tool in that garage belonged to me, earned through honest work and careful saving. I had no idea that by opening that door, I was inviting a thief into my sanctuary, one who wore a badge and carried the law itself as her lockpick. The paper Sheriff Sheila thrust into my hands bore the county courthouse seal and was filled with legal jargon that swam before my eyes. Words like "pursuant to" and aforementioned allegations jumbled together, but the authorization was clear enough. They could search my garage workshop based on suspicion of harboring stolen property. "This cannot be right," I said, reading the document more carefully. "What stolen property? From where? When? There are no specifics here." Sheriff Sheila adjusted her belt, the handcuffs on her hip catching the afternoon light. "The warrant covers any tools or equipment reported missing in Haralton County over the past 18 months. We have received credible information suggesting some items may be located on your premises." Behind her stood Deputy Collins, a young man I recognized from the coffee shop downtown but had never formally met. His eyes darted around nervously, never quite meeting mine. "I would like to be present during the search," I stated firmly, taking a step toward my open garage door. Sheriff Sheila placed her hand on my chest, stopping me. "That will not be possible, Mr. Jensen. For the integrity of the investigation, we need you to remain outside while we conduct our search. You can wait on your porch or in your house." "That is my livelihood in there," I protested. "Everything I own is organized specifically. If things get moved around—" "We will be respectful of your property," she interrupted. "But the warrant is clear. You need to step back now." Deputy Collins moved past me, entering my workshop with a large, empty duffel bag. Something about that bag made my stomach twist. It seemed prepared, predetermined, as if they knew exactly what they were coming for. From my porch, I watched through the slatted blinds covering the garage windows. Their movements were deliberate, methodical. Sheriff Sheila did not rummage through storage bins or examine the lumber rack. She did not open drawers of screws and nails or inspect my collection of paint cans. Instead, she walked directly to my power tool section, pointing to specific items while Deputy Collins took notes. They spent 47 minutes in my workshop. I know because I checked my watch repeatedly. each minute stretching like an hour as strangers handled my possessions without explanation or oversight. When they finally emerged, Sheriff Sheila carried nothing. Deputy Collins followed behind her, the duffel bag now noticeably fuller, its sides straining against whatever had been placed inside. "We need to take several items for further investigation," Sheriff Sheila announced, her voice flat and official. "You will receive a receipt for anything removed from the premises." "What items?" I demanded. "I need to see what you are taking." She produced a clipboard with a form attached. "Sign here acknowledging that we conducted the search according to the warrant." "I want to see inside that bag first," I insisted. Her expression hardened. "Mr. Jensen, this is not a negotiation. Sign the form. You will receive proper documentation about any items taken for investigation within 3 business days, as required by law." Deputy Collins avoided eye contact, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, but I felt powerless to stop it. I signed the form, my signature shaky with suppressed anger and growing dread. They departed without further explanation. The moment their cruiser pulled away, I rushed into my garage. The space looked undisturbed at first glance, everything in its place. But as I approached my power tool section, the gaps became apparent. My DeWalt cordless drill set, the one I had saved for 6 months to purchase, was gone. My professional-grade orbital sander had vanished. And most devastating of all, my father's custom torque wrench, the one he had given me on my 18th birthday before cancer took him 4 months later, was missing. With trembling hands, I dialed the sheriff's office. The receptionist put me through to Sheriff Sheila directly. "Sheriff's office, Sheriff Grayson speaking. This is Marcus Jensen. You just left my property, and I am missing 3 valuable tools. I need to know where they are and when they will be returned." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle that chilled me to the bone. "Mr. Jensen, we documented everything we removed. If you cannot locate some of your tools, perhaps they were misplaced before our arrival, or perhaps they were never truly yours to begin with. My father's torque wrench has my initials engraved on the handle," I said, my voice rising. "It has been in my possession for over a decade. You had no right." "I suggest you wait for the official documentation, Mr. Jensen, and I would caution against making accusations against law enforcement without evidence. That could be construed as harassment." The line went dead. I stood in my garage, surrounded by the tools of my trade, feeling violated in a way I had never experienced before. This was not law enforcement. This was theft hiding behind a badge. That night I did not sleep. I paced my living room, replaying the events over and over, trying to understand what had happened and why. By morning, my confusion had crystallized into certainty. Sheriff Sheila had targeted me specifically, and I doubted I was her first victim. 3 days passed with no documentation arriving regarding my seized tools. On the 4th day, I visited Ellis Hardware, the only proper tools supplier in our county and a gathering place for local tradesmen. Frank Ellis had run the place for 30 years and knew every contractor, carpenter, and handyman within 50 miles. "Frank," I said quietly, leaning against the counter while he finished helping another customer, "has anyone else mentioned having tools confiscated by Sheriff Sheila during a search or inspection?" Frank's bushy eyebrows drew together. He glanced around the nearly empty store before responding. "Why do you ask?" I explained what had happened: the vague warrant, the targeted search, the missing tools, and the dismissive response when I called to report them missing. Frank wiped his hands on his apron, his expression darkening. "You are not the first to ask, Marcus. Cal Robertson lost a pneumatic nail gun 3 months back, said it was taken during a safety inspection of his job site trailer. Never saw it again. My heart sank. Anyone else? Mike Delaney had a generator disappear from his workshop after Sheriff Sheila stopped by about a noise complaint. Pete Wilson lost a set of specialty clamps. Frank leaned closer. None of them got any paperwork. None of them got their stuff back. Why has nobody reported this? I asked, incredulous. Frank gave me a knowing look. To whom? The sheriff's department. The same folks who took the items in the first place. He shook his head. Cal tried pushing back. Next thing you know, he got 3 building code violations in a single week. Pete found his truck getting pulled over every other day for routine checks. People got the message pretty quick. I felt sick. This was not random. This was systematic. A pattern of abuse hiding in plain sight, protected by the very authority meant to prevent such crimes. That evening, I pulled out an old fireproof lockbox from my closet. Inside, I placed the original receipt for my DeWalt drill set, photographs I had taken of my workshop for insurance purposes, and the copy of the search warrant Sheriff Sheila had given me. I added handwritten notes detailing the exact timeline of events and descriptions of the missing items. The next day, I purchased a small digital voice recorder. Minnesota was a one-party consent state for recordings, and I intended to document every interaction moving forward. I also started backing up security camera footage from my home system to a cloud server rather than just the local hard drive. I called Mike Delaney and invited him for coffee at the diner on Main Street. He seemed nervous when I brought up Sheriff Sheila, his eyes constantly darting to the door. "I cannot talk about this, Marcus," he whispered. "I have 2 kids in school. I cannot afford trouble." "She took your generator, Mike. That is theft." He stared into his coffee cup. "Call it what you want. I call it the cost of living peaceful in Millbrook these days." He stood abruptly. "I have got to go. Do yourself a favor, let it drop." But I could not let it drop. Each night I added to my documentation names, dates, items reported missing. The pattern was unmistakable. Sheriff Sheila targeted small contractors and tradespeople, people who worked with their hands and kept valuable tools. She always had some pretext, a complaint, an inspection, a report of stolen goods, and she always left with something valuable. After 2 weeks of gathering information, I typed up a formal complaint and drove to the county administration building. The clerk at the sheriff's department oversight office accepted my paperwork with a bored expression. "You will receive confirmation of your filing within 10 business days," she recited mechanically. 15 days later, having received no acknowledgement, I returned to the oversight office. "I need to check on the status of a complaint I filed 2 weeks ago," I explained to the same clerk. She tapped at her computer keyboard, frowning slightly. "Your name again." "Marcus Jensen." More typing. "I do not see any complaint filed under that name in the past 30 days. "That is impossible," I protested. "I handed it to you personally on the 15th. She shrugged. "If it is not in the system, it was never properly filed. Would you like to submit a new complaint?" I left the building with my hands shaking, not from fear but from anger. The complaint had not been lost. It had been deliberately removed. The corruption ran deeper than just Sheriff Sheila. She had allies protecting her. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, a sheriff's department cruiser idled at the curb. Deputy Collins watched me from behind the wheel, making no effort to hide his surveillance. The message was clear. I was being watched. They knew I was asking questions. I stared directly at him as I unlocked my front door. If they thought intimidation would silence me, They had fundamentally misunderstood what kind of man they were dealing with. I was not someone who backed down when pushed. It was time to go above their heads. If local oversight was compromised, I would need to take this to the state level. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension maintained an office in the state government building in St. Paul, a 90-minute drive from Millbrook. I took a personal day, canceled my appointments, and made the journey on a rainy Tuesday morning. The surveillance cruiser followed me to the edge of town before turning back. The BCA building was imposing, glass and concrete rising 8 stories, with a security checkpoint at the entrance. I approached the reception desk with my folder of documentation clutched tightly under my arm. "I need to speak with someone about filing a complaint against a county sheriff," I explained to the receptionist. She directed me to the Public Integrity Unit on the 4th floor. There, I was asked to complete additional paperwork detailing my allegations before being told to wait. The chairs in the waiting area were uncomfortable by design, seemingly intended to test the determination of complainants. After 47 minutes, a door opened, and a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses appeared. "Mr. Jensen, I am Investigator Whitman. Please come in." His office was sparse but organized, with neatly labeled files and a computer displaying multiple open windows of text. He gestured for me to sit. "I understand you have concerns about Sheriff Sheila Grayson of Millbrook," he began, consulting a notepad. "Before we proceed, I should inform you that making false allegations against a law enforcement officer is a serious matter with potential legal consequences." "I understand," I replied, opening my folder. "Every statement I am about to make is true and documented to the best of my ability." For the next hour, I walked Investigator Whitman through the events, the search, the missing tools, the pattern of similar incidents reported by other tradespeople, and the mysteriously vanishing complaint at the county level. I provided copies of receipts, photographs, and my detailed timeline. Whitman took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions but revealing nothing in his expression. I could not tell if he believed me or thought I was wasting his time. "What exactly do you expect to happen here, Mr. Jensen?" he asked finally. "I expect the law to apply equally to everyone," I answered. "If I had entered someone's property and taken their possessions without documentation, I would be arrested for theft. Sheriff Grayson should be held to the same standard, at minimum." Whitman removed his glasses, polishing them slowly with a microfiber cloth. "This is not the first whisper we have heard about Millbrook," he admitted. "But whispers are not evidence. What you have provided is more substantial than most complaints we receive, but still largely circumstantial." My heart sank. "So nothing will be done." "I did not say that," Whitman corrected. "I will need detailed statements from others affected, documented evidence of missing items, proof of the pattern you describe. Can you provide that?" "People are afraid to speak out," I explained. "She retaliates." "That is often the case with abuse of authority," Whitman acknowledged. "But without additional testimony, this remains one man's allegation against a credentialed law enforcement officer." I left Whitman my contact information and copies of all my documentation. He promised to review everything and determine if there was sufficient cause to open a formal investigation. The drive back to Millbrook felt longer than the journey out. Rain pelted my windshield as I considered Whitman's words. I needed more evidence, more witnesses. But how could I convince others to come forward when they feared retaliation? My answer arrived in my mailbox the next morning, a large envelope containing a $1,200 citation for improper storage of construction materials creating a fire hazard. Attached were photographs of my lumber rack in the garage, the same rack that had passed previous inspections without comment. The citation was signed by Sheriff Sheila Grayson. This was no coincidence. This was retaliation, plain and simple. She knew I had gone to the state. Somehow she had been informed of my complaint, and this was her response: financial punishment disguised as enforcement. I called Investigator Whitman immediately. "She just issued me a citation for a violation that does not exist," I explained. "This is clear retaliation." "Document it," Whitman advised. "Take photographs of the alleged violation area. Find previous inspection reports that cleared the same setup. This could be useful in establishing a pattern of targeted harassment." That evening, as I photographed my lumber rack from every angle, my neighbor Carl knocked on my door. "Everything okay, Marcus? Saw the sheriff's car parked outside earlier." "Just delivering some paperwork," I replied carefully. Carl hesitated. "Listen, I do not want to get involved, but I overheard Sheriff Sheila at the diner yesterday. She was on her phone, talking about teaching that handyman to mind his own business. I am pretty sure she meant you." I thanked Carl for the information and added his statement to my growing file. Sheriff Sheila had made a critical mistake. By retaliating, she had confirmed my suspicions and strengthened my case. She thought her badge made her untouchable. She was about to learn otherwise. The Millbrook Public Library maintained archives of the local newspaper dating back to the town's founding in 1887. The records from the past 20 years had been digitized, making my research considerably easier. I sat at one of the public computers, searching for any mention of Sheriff Sheila Grayson before she arrived in our town. She had come from Clayton County, approximately 80 miles north. According to the announcement of her hearing, she had served there for 7 years as a deputy before being selected as Millbrook's new sheriff. The article praised her exemplary record and commitment to community safety. I expanded my search to include Clayton County news sources. For 3 hours, I combed through digital archives, finding only routine mentions of Sheriff Grayson attending community events or commenting on local crimes. Nothing suspicious, nothing controversial. Then I tried a different approach. Instead of searching for her name directly, I looked for legal notices, civil court filings, and sealed cases in Clayton County during her tenure. The third page of results contained a single line that made my pulse quicken. Civil Case 2018 CV4392, John Doe vs. Clayton County Sheriff's Department, Deputy S. Grayson, et al. Status: settled with non-disclosure agreement. A sealed settlement with a confidentiality clause. The plaintiff had used a pseudonym, suggesting they feared identification. I wrote down the case number and drove to the Clayton County Courthouse the following morning. The clerk at the records office was young and clearly bored with her job. When I requested information on the case, she tapped at her keyboard before shaking her head. "That case is sealed by court order," she stated flatly. "I understand the details are sealed," I replied. "But the general nature of the complaint should be public record. Was it a vehicle accident, a property dispute?" She hesitated, then checked her screen again. "The docket description lists it as civil liberties violation during a property search. That is all I can tell you." That was enough. Civil liberties violation during a property search, exactly the pattern I had observed in Millbrook. Sheriff Sheila had done this before, and someone had challenged her, resulting in a settlement significant enough to warrant sealing the records. I needed to find someone who knew more about that case. Someone who had worked with Sheila during that time, but was no longer under her influence. The Clayton County Sheriff's Department website listed their Retired Officers Association, which hosted monthly breakfasts at a local diner. I arrived early for their next meeting and positioned myself at a corner booth where I could observe the attendees. Most were in their 60s and 70s, trading stories and complaints about modern policing methods. I approached an elderly man who had just finished his meal and was preparing to leave. "Excuse me, sir. My name is Marcus Jensen. I am researching the career of Sheriff Sheila Grayson for a community leadership profile. I understand you might have worked with her in Clayton County." The man's friendly expression immediately hardened. "No comment," he stated, attempting to move past me. "Please," I pressed. "This is important. There have been concerning incidents in Millbrook where she now serves as sheriff. If there were similar issues during her time in Clayton County, people should know." He glanced around the diner, then gestured for me to follow him outside. In the parking lot, safely away from others, he spoke in a low voice. "I cannot use my name. I still have family in law enforcement." "I understand," I assured him. "Sheila was always selective about which laws applied to her," he began. "Evidence would disappear from lockup. Nice items from searches would vanish from inventory. Anyone who questioned her found themselves assigned to midnight shifts in the worst districts." "Was there a significant incident involving a property search?" I asked. "Around 2018. The man's eyes narrowed. "You know about that. It was a local contractor, custom furniture maker, high-end stuff. She conducted a search based on an anonymous tip about stolen materials. When she left, several $1,000s worth of exotic hardwoods were missing. No documentation, no evidence logs." "What happened?" "He had security cameras. Caught her and another deputy loading the wood into their personal vehicles. He filed suit. The department settled quickly to avoid publicity, but she was transferred to patrol duties afterward. Then she applied for the Millbrook position. I guess your town did not check references too carefully." I thanked him for his information, promising to keep his identity confidential. As we parted, he gripped my arm tightly. "Be careful," he warned. "She does not forgive people who cross her." Armed with this new information, I drove directly to St. Paul to meet with Investigator Whitman again. This time, he seemed more engaged, taking detailed notes about the Clayton County case and the former deputy's statement. "This establishes a pattern of behavior," Whitman acknowledged. "If she was doing this in Clayton County and continued after moving to Millbrook, we have grounds for a more formal investigation." "Will you need me to testify?" I asked. "Eventually, yes. Are you prepared for that? Once we open an official case, Sheriff Grayson will be notified of the allegations against her. Based on what you have told me, she may escalate her retaliation." I considered this carefully. My business depended on my reputation in the community. Sheriff Sheila could damage that reputation, create problems with permits and inspections, even fabricate charges against me. Standing against her would come at a cost. "I will testify," I decided. "Someone has to stand up to her." Whitman nodded approvingly. "We will need a formal deposition next week. In the meantime, continue documenting everything. And Mr. Jensen, watch your back." That warning proved prophetic. As I pulled into my driveway that evening, I found Sheriff Sheila herself waiting on my porch. Not in her cruiser, not in uniform, but in plainclothes, leaning against my front door like she owned it. "Good evening, Mr. Jensen," she called out, her voice deceptively friendly. "I think it is time you and I had a private conversation about boundaries and respect." I stopped halfway up the walk, maintaining distance between us. "I have nothing to discuss with you outside official channels, Sheriff." Her smile vanished. "You have been asking questions, digging into my past, traveling to St. Paul for meetings. Did you think I would not find out?" "Every citizen has the right to file complaints about public officials," I replied evenly. "If you have done nothing wrong, you have nothing to fear from an investigation." She descended the porch steps, moving closer. "Let me be clear. You are a nobody, a handyman with a toolbox. I am the law in this county. This little crusade of yours will accomplish nothing except your own ruin." I stood my ground. "Is that a threat, Sheriff?" "Consider it friendly advice," she replied. "Drop your complaint. Tell the state it was all a misunderstanding. If you do, perhaps we can resolve that citation without further penalty." "And my tools," I asked, "will those be returned as well?" Something dangerous flashed in her eyes. "What tools? According to our records, nothing was removed from your property during our search." Without another word, she walked past me to her personal vehicle parked on the street. As she opened the door, she paused. "3 days, Mr. Jensen. Then I cannot guarantee what might happen." I watched her drive away, my hands trembling not from fear but from restraint. Every instinct urged me to back down, to protect myself and my livelihood. But something deeper, something my father had instilled in me long ago, demanded that I stand firm against injustice, especially when it wore a badge. That night I emailed Investigator Whitman, detailing Sheriff Sheila's visit and her explicit threat. The investigation was no longer just about stolen tools. It had become about something far more valuable, the integrity of the law itself. I knew it would happen eventually. Confrontation was inevitable in a town this small. But I didn't expect it to happen at Johnson's hardware store on a Tuesday morning. I was carefully examining replacement drill bits, comparing the titanium-coated ones to the standard steel. The store was quiet, just a few regulars browsing the aisles and old Mr. Johnson himself helping a young couple pick out paint swatches for their first home. The bell above the door jingled, but I paid it no mind until I felt a presence behind me. "Interesting choice of bits there," Sheriff Sheila said, her voice carrying just enough to make others look over. "Planning another project." I took my time setting down the package before turning to face her. She stood with her thumbs hooked into her belt, her badge catching the fluorescent lights overhead. Her deputy hovered near the entrance, watching. "Just replacing what was lost," I replied, keeping my voice measured and calm. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. The smell of coffee and mint gum washed over me. "I hear you've been making phone calls, filing paperwork, asking questions about things that don't concern you." A couple of customers pretended to browse nearby, but their attention was fixed on our exchange. She wanted an audience. She wanted me to lose my composure. "I'm exercising my rights as a citizen," I said, maintaining eye contact. "Nothing more, nothing less." Sheriff Sheila laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the metal shelving. "Rights? Let me tell you about rights. I have the right to inspect any property in this county if I have reasonable suspicion. I have the right to issue citations for code violations. I have the right to make your life very, very uncomfortable." She leaned in closer, dropping her voice. "That citation for improper material storage, that's just the beginning. I'm going to find every violation on your property, every outdated permit, every single infraction you've committed in the last decade." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I refused to shrink away. "Are you threatening me, Sheriff?" "I'm informing you about the consequences of interfering with an active department," she hissed. "Back off before this gets messy." The teenage cashier had sidled closer, pretending to restock a nearby shelf. I noticed the phone in his hand angled toward us. Recording. Sheriff Sheila hadn't noticed yet. "I need to be clear about something," I said, speaking at a normal volume now. "I am cooperating with the state investigation. I have submitted evidence of systematic theft and abuse of authority, and I am not the only one." Her eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected me to be so direct. "You have no idea what you're up against," she said, her voice dangerously low. "This town runs the way I say it runs." I stood my ground, conscious of the kid still recording. "No law enforcement officer is above the law, not even you, Sheriff." She stepped back, her hand instinctively brushing her holster, not as a threat but as a reminder of her authority. "We'll see about that." As she turned to leave, she knocked a display of screwdrivers to the floor with her elbow. The clatter was jarring in the tense silence that had fallen over the store. "You might want to clean that up," she said, not bothering to look back as she pushed through the door, her deputy following close behind. For a moment, no one moved. Then Mr. Johnson hurried over, helping me pick up the scattered tools. "You okay, son?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said, though my hands trembled slightly as I gathered the screwdrivers. The teenage cashier approached, tucking his phone away. "I got it all," he whispered. "My cousin works at the newspaper." By nightfall, the video had spread across town social media. The quality was grainy, the audio sometimes difficult to make out, but the intimidation was clear. Sheriff Sheila's face twisted with anger, her posture threatening, my calm responses. Comments flooded in. Other stories emerged. A plumber who lost specialized equipment, a carpenter whose expensive circular saw disappeared, a mechanic whose diagnostic tools vanished during an inspection. The video had cracked something open in our community. Fear was giving way to anger. Silence was giving way to voices. And for the first time since this began, I felt that perhaps I wasn't standing alone. That night I received a text message from Whitman at the State Bureau. "Video received. Evidence mounting. Stand firm." I slept better than I had in weeks. The hearing room was smaller than I had imagined. No grand courthouse chambers, just a modest municipal conference room with fluorescent lighting and simulated wood paneling. The State Oversight Board members sat at a long table facing rows of chairs, their expressions carefully neutral as people filed in. I arrived early, clutching the worn leather folder that contained months of careful documentation, every receipt for my missing tools, photographs of my organized garage before and after Sheila's search, audio recordings of follow-up conversations, statements from other victims, public records requests, newspaper clippings, each piece of evidence meticulously labeled and organized. As I took my seat in the front row, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Dale, the roofer who'd lost his compressor. Behind him stood Mike from the auto shop, and beyond him at least 6 other tradesmen from around the county. They nodded silently, a small army in work boots and weathered hands. None of us were public speakers. None of us were lawyers, but today we were witnesses. Sheriff Sheila arrived 10 minutes late, flanked by her department attorney. She wore her full uniform, medals polished to a shine. A power move. As she passed my row, her eyes briefly met mine, cold and confident. The chairman called the hearing to order. "This investigative hearing concerns allegations of misconduct against Sheriff Sheila Barnett of Westland County. We will hear testimony from multiple witnesses regarding alleged abuse of authority and misappropriation of property during official searches." I was called first. My palms were slick with sweat as I took the oath, but my voice remained steady. Please state your name and occupation for the record, the chairwoman said. My name is Thomas Mitchell. I am a self-employed contractor and handyman in Westland County. Mr. Mitchell, please describe the incident that brought you here today. I took a deep breath and began. I described my life as a tradesman, the importance of my tools, the search that led to their disappearance. I explained how I had called to report the theft, only to be dismissed. I opened my folder and presented the before and after photographs of my tool cabinet. These 3 items, a DeWalt cordless drill set, a precision torque wrench, and a professional-grade sander, were present before Sheriff Barnett's search. They were gone afterward. Their combined value exceeds $950. The state investigator, Whitman, approached with additional questions. How did you determine it was Sheriff Barnett who took these items? No one else entered my garage. The items were there before her search, gone after she left. Additionally, I've since learned that similar thefts occurred following her searches of other workshops in our county. Sheila's attorney interrupted. Objection. The witness is speculating and making accusations without direct evidence. The chairman leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell is sharing his direct experience and observations. Please continue. I presented my evidence methodically, piece by piece. The missing complaint form, the retaliatory citation, the pattern of targeted searches against tradespeople. When it was Sheila's attorney's turn to question me, he immediately went on the offensive. Mr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you've had multiple code violations on your property before Sheriff Barnett ever conducted her search? No, sir. I've never received a citation prior to filing my complaint. And isn't it possible you simply misplaced these tools, or perhaps sold them to cover financial difficulties? I maintained my composure. I have owned that torque wrench for 15 years. It belonged to my father. I did not misplace it, and I certainly did not sell it. The attorney shuffled through his papers. Your contracting business has seen a downturn in recent years, has it not? Perhaps this whole charade is an attempt to secure financial compensation. Before I could answer, Dale stood up from his seat. I lost tools too, he called out. Then Mike stood. So did I. Another voice from the back. She took my generator. The chairman gavelled for order. We will hear all testimony in due course. It appears we have more witnesses than originally anticipated. For nearly 4 hours, one after another, members of our community approached the stand, each with a similar story, each with their own evidence, each connecting another dot in the pattern. Sheila sat with her arms crossed, her expression hardening as the testimony mounted. Her attorney passed her notes, but she barely glanced at them. When it was her turn to speak, she denied everything, describing the allegations as a coordinated smear campaign by disgruntled individuals with histories of noncompliance. As the hearing concluded for the day, the chairman announced, "Due to the volume of testimony and evidence presented, this hearing will be extended. We will reconvene next Monday to continue." Outside, reporters gathered on the courthouse steps. Dale nudged me forward. "You started this. You should speak." I shook my head. "We all speak together or not at all. This isn't about me anymore." And it wasn't. The small folder I had carried in had been joined by a dozen more. Individual complaints had become a chorus. The case against Sheriff Sheila was no longer built on missing tools. It was built on a community that had finally found its voice. Change began slowly, like a river shifting its course. There was no dramatic revolution, no storming of the sheriff's office with pitchforks and torches. Instead, it came in small, deliberate actions that accumulated like sediment, gradually altering the landscape of our town. The morning after the extended hearing was announced, I drove past the sheriff's station and noticed something unusual. A small group of people stood on the public sidewalk opposite the building. Maybe 15 individuals, mostly older folks and a few younger families. They weren't shouting. They weren't even carrying large signs. Just small, handwritten placards that read things like "Respect the badge, not the abuse, and service, not theft." Mrs. Henderson, who ran the local bakery, was among them. She waved as I drove by. I had fixed her oven last year when it broke down the week before Thanksgiving. I pulled over. "What's all this?" I asked. "We're standing for what's right," she said simply. "Nothing more dramatic than that. Just letting everyone know that the community is watching now." The next day there were 25 people. The day after, nearly 40. They rotated throughout the day, always maintaining a respectful distance, never blocking access, never raising their voices. Just a constant, undeniable presence. Meanwhile, other changes were taking shape. The Gazette ran a front-page story about the hearing, including quotes from anonymous deputies within Sheila's own department. "She operated by her own rules," one was quoted saying. "There were items confiscated that never made it to the evidence room. Questions were discouraged." Another deputy described a culture of fear within the department itself. You either played along or you found yourself assigned to the worst shifts, the most dangerous calls, with the least backup. When Sheriff Sheila's patrol car needed new tires, Mike at the auto shop suddenly found himself all booked up. When the department printer needed service, the local electronics store discovered they were out of the necessary parts. Small businesses across town began finding polite ways to delay or decline service to the sheriff's department. At the monthly town council meeting, attendance swelled to standing room only. People who had never before participated in local politics came forward during public comment, sharing their own experiences or simply expressing support for the investigation. Councilwoman Martinez, who had served for nearly a decade, proposed a formal administrative review of all search procedures and evidence handling within the sheriff's department. The motion passed unanimously. "This is not about targeting an individual," she carefully stated for the record. "This is about ensuring our procedures protect the rights and property of all citizens." Everyone knew exactly what she meant. Throughout all of this, Sheriff Sheila became increasingly scarce. Deputies handled routine patrol duties. Her parking spot at the station often remained empty. When she did appear at official functions, she was withdrawn, her usual confident swagger replaced with rigid formality. One evening, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mitchell, this is Deputy Collins." I tensed immediately. Collins was Sheila's right-hand man in the department. "What can I do for you, Deputy?" There was a long pause. "I want you to know something. Not all of us knew what was happening. Not all of us approved." "Why are you telling me this?" Another pause. "Because tomorrow, the Internal Affairs Division from the state is coming to collect our search logs and bodycam footage from the past 3 years, and I wanted you to hear it from someone inside." The next morning, official vehicles with state government plates were parked outside the sheriff's station. Men and women in suits carried boxes of files and hard drives to their cars. The quiet protest across the street had grown to nearly 60 people, still silent, still watchful. That afternoon, I received a text from Dale. "Channel 5 wants to interview us, all of us, together." We gathered at my workshop, myself, Dale, Mike, and 4 others who had testified. The reporter asked about the tools, about the retaliation, about the hearing. But her final question caught me off guard. "What do you hope comes from all this?" I looked at the faces around me, hardworking people who had simply wanted to be left alone to do their jobs, to live their lives. People who had found courage together that none of us might have found alone. "This was never about revenge," I said finally. "This was about making sure the law protects, not exploits. It's about ensuring that power serves the community, not itself." After the reporter left, we remained in my workshop, sharing stories and planning for the final hearing day. In the corner, my father's old radio played classic country music. The tools that remained hung neatly on their designated hooks. The violation notices from Sheriff Sheila were pinned to a corkboard, reminders of where this journey had begun. Outside, the sun was setting on our small town. Something had shifted, something had broken, and something new was being built in its place. The day of the final hearing arrived with an unseasonable chill, gray clouds hanging low over our town. I dressed carefully that morning, not in a suit, which would have felt like a costume, but in my best flannel shirt, pressed jeans, and the work boots I had polished until I could see my reflection in them. This was who I was. This was who we all were, working people who had finally said enough. The hearing room was filled beyond capacity. Additional chairs had been brought in. People stood along the walls. Local news cameras had been permitted in the corner. Sheriff Sheila arrived last, escorted by her attorney and two deputies who looked uncomfortable in their formal uniforms. She no longer carried herself with the same imperious confidence. Her shoulders were tense, her eyes darting around the room, tallying allies and enemies. She found few of the former. The oversight board members filed in, their expressions grave. The chairman called the room to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. After 3 days of testimony, review of evidence both documentary and photographic, examination of departmental records, and interviews with current and former deputies, this board is prepared to issue its findings in the matter of Sheriff Sheila Barnett. The room fell silent. I could hear the soft whir of the news cameras, the rustle of papers, my own heartbeat in my ears. The board finds, by unanimous decision, that there is substantial and compelling evidence of systematic abuse of authority under color of law. A murmur rippled through the audience. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of procedural violations including conducting searches outside the stated scope of warrants, failure to properly document confiscated items, intimidation of citizens exercising their rights to file complaints, and retaliatory actions against those who question departmental practices. The chairman looked directly at Sheriff Sheila, who sat rigid in her chair. Most seriously, this board finds credible evidence of theft of personal property during official searches, including tools and equipment from at least 14 separate incidents over a 3-year period. The chairman then read off a list of items, each one matched to its owner, each one taken under the guise of official business. My drill set, Dale's compressor, Mike's diagnostic equipment, and so many others. The total value exceeded $25,000. These items were never logged into evidence. They were never documented in any departmental records. They simply vanished. Sheila's attorney leaned over to whisper something to her. She brushed him off, her face a mask of stone. Based on these findings, this board issues the following orders. First, Sheriff Barnett is directed to make full financial restitution to all affected parties at fair market value of the items taken, plus an additional 20% for damages and inconvenience. Second, Sheriff Barnett is required to submit her immediate resignation from office, effective today. Third, This board recommends to the State Law Enforcement Standards Commission that Sheriff Barnett's law enforcement certification be permanently revoked. The finality of it hung in the air. A career ended, a power stripped away. Justice delivered in a municipal conference room with faded carpet and flickering fluorescent lights. Does the respondent wish to make a statement before this hearing concludes? The chairman asked. All eyes turned to Sheriff Sheila. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, might offer some explanation or justification. Instead, she stood, removed her badge from her uniform, and placed it on the table before her with a metallic click that echoed in the silent room. Without a word, she walked out, alone. No deputies followed. Her attorney gathered his papers and hurried after her. The chairman struck his gavel once more. This hearing is concluded. Outside, reporters surrounded me and the others who had testified. Microphones thrust toward us, questions overlapping. How do you feel about the decision? Will you be filing additional lawsuits? What message does this send to other law enforcement? I raised my hands, asking for quiet. The group of tradesmen stood behind me, a wall of silent support. Today is not about triumph, I said carefully. It's about restoration, restoration of trust, restoration of justice, restoration of the relationship between law enforcement and the community it serves. A reporter called out, "Are you satisfied with your revenge against Sheriff Barnett?" I shook my head. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. Every person who wears a badge carries enormous power. With that power comes the responsibility to use it justly. What happens now? Another reporter asked. Now, we rebuild. Not just the trust that was broken, but everything that was damaged along the way. This community is stronger than one person's abuse of power. We proved that by standing together. As the crowd dispersed, Whitman from the State Bureau approached me. "You did good work here," he said, extending his hand. "Not many people would have had the courage to stand up like you did." "I had help," I replied, gesturing to the others walking down the courthouse steps. "What will you do with the restitution money?" he asked. I looked across the street at the small park where generations of local children had played. It had fallen into disrepair in recent years, the playground equipment rusted, the benches broken. "I think I might have some ideas about that," I said. "This town could use some rebuilding." That evening I returned to my garage. I ran my hands over the empty spaces in my tool cabinet, spaces that would soon be filled again. But the emptiness no longer felt like loss. It felt like possibility, like room for something new to begin. 6 months passed. Winter gave way to spring, then to the full heat of summer. The restitution payments arrived as ordered, not just to me, but to everyone who had lost property during Sheriff Sheila's reign. For some, it was simply money to replace what was taken. For me, it became something more. I purchased the old Peterson building on Main Street, a forgotten warehouse space with high ceilings, enormous windows, and decades of dust. Most people thought I was crazy. The place had been empty for 15 years, ever since the furniture factory closed and moved operations overseas. "What are you going to do with all that space?" people asked. "Your contracting business doesn't need a showroom that big." I would just smile and say, "You'll see." For 2 months, I worked from dawn until dusk. I repaired the roof. I replaced broken windows. I sanded the original hardwood floors until they gleamed with the warm patina of age. I rewired the electrical system and installed proper ventilation. Every nail I drove felt like an affirmation. Every board I measured was a declaration of purpose. Other tradesmen began to stop by, curious about the activity. "Need any help?" Dale asked one afternoon, examining my progress on the interior walls. "Actually, I do," I replied, "but not just from you." I unrolled the blueprints I had been working on. The plans showed workstations throughout the space, a lumber storage area, a shared equipment zone, classroom space. "What is all this?" Dale asked. "It's going to be a community workshop," I explained. "A place where people can use tools they can't afford to buy themselves, where kids can learn trades from the people who know them best, where we build things together." Word spread quickly. The project that had begun as my own personal recovery transformed into something much larger. Mike offered to set up an automotive section in one corner. Mrs. Henderson's son, who taught art at the high school, volunteered to help design classes for teenagers. Donations began to arrive. An old table saw from a retired carpenter, a welding setup from the auto shop, books on woodworking, metalwork, home repair, and electrical systems formed a small but growing library in the corner. 3 months after I purchased the building, we opened the doors to the Westland Community Workshop. The mayor cut the ribbon. Local news covered the story. But the moment that meant the most came when a group of high school students walked in, eyes wide at the possibilities before them. "Can we really use all this?" one boy asked, running his hand reverently over a lathe. "That's why it's here," I told him. "But first, you need to learn how to use it properly." That summer, we ran our first youth program. 20 teenagers learning basic carpentry, tool safety, and project planning. They built birdhouses, then garden benches, then helped restore the playground equipment in the park across from the courthouse. Above the main entrance, we installed a simple plaque that read, "Built by those who refuse to stay silent." Most visitors assumed it referred to the craftsmanship of the renovated building. Those of us who had lived through Sheriff Sheila's abuses knew its deeper meaning. One evening, as I was locking up after a busy day, a woman approached. She had been hired as the interim sheriff after Sheila's removal and had recently won the special election to keep the position permanently. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, extending her hand, "I've been meaning to come by. This is quite a place you've built." "Thank you, Sheriff Reynolds," I replied, shaking her hand. "I want you to know that we've implemented all the procedural changes recommended by the Oversight Board. New documentation protocols for searches, body cameras on at all times during property inspections, civilian review of complaints." I nodded. "I've heard people notice the difference." She glanced at the workshop behind me. "You turned something ugly into something beautiful. That takes a special kind of vision." After she left, I walked back through the workshop, turning off lights. The space was transforming daily, new projects taking shape, new skills being learned. From where I stood, I could see the workbench where a grandfather was teaching his granddaughter how to plane wood, the corner where a young man who had been in trouble with the law was discovering a talent for precision metalwork, the classroom where a group of women were learning basic home repairs. I never asked to be part of a fight, never wanted to be at the center of a controversy. I was just a man who valued his tools and his word. But when someone steals from you under the name of law, staying quiet is just another kind of surrender. And I do not surrender. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's about what you build after the breaking. Each nail driven, each board cut, each skill passed on, these are also forms of justice. The kind that lasts, the kind that heals. In my pocket, I still keep my father's old tape measure. Worn from decades of use, its numbers faded but still legible. A reminder that how we measure things matters, that standards exist for a reason, that precision and care are virtues worth protecting. And in this shop rebuilt from the ruins of injustice, those values take new form every day, in the hands of neighbors, in the projects we create together, in the community we continue to build.